people call that an attempted insurrection on the 6th. I think that's a real exaggeration. It was a riot. It was a storming of the building. Insurrections are made of much more than that. On the other hand, there actually was a lot going on in the lead up to the January 6th. And that's where we really should be looking, because that's what exposes what in fact was, I think, an attempted coup.
Yeah.
And it also exposes the sort of fracture lines amongst the elites, because the chronology goes like this. On January 4th, rounded up by Dick Cheney and his daughter Liz, 10 former secretaries of defense issue a statement calling on the military not to get involved in the outcome of the elections. On the same day, Admiral Stavridis, who used to be the supreme commander of NATO, publishes an article in Time magazine where he supports the letter of the 10 former secretaries of defense. And he says that when these secretaries of defense saw or heard that Trump had directly tried to intimidate the governor of Georgia into reversing, finding him, find me 15,000 more votes. Stavridis writes, a chill must have gone down their spine. Now, Stavridis is a big player. He's not only the former supreme commander of NATO, he's like one of the most senior people in Carlyle Group, which is this private equity fund that's one of the biggest investors in the military industrial complex. So he's a serious player, this guy. And he's supporting this letter calling on the military to stay out. So on the same day, the Financial Times has an editorial. And in that, they end the editorial by actually saying a coup is in progress. Now, this is 2 days before the events of January 6th. Now, now jump ahead to January 6th. The doors of Congress get stormed at 2:10 in the afternoon, more or less. At something like 3:04 in the afternoon, less than an hour after the doors are stormed, the Association of American Manufacturers issues a press release where they call on Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove Trump from office. Now, remember, he's still president then. Now, that doesn't happen in an hour. It's not like they stormed the doors and then the Association of American Manufacturers says, oh, geez, we better make a statement calling up. This was all set ahead of time. And then you look at Milley's, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, some of the things he said afterwards. And this did come out in Woodward's book. That he actually thought Trump might try to start a war with Iran to help put off the transition to Biden. So two or three very important things come out of this, which is one, some very significant players in the American political elite and military elite and financial corporate elite certainly believed a real attempted coup was in progress. Two, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and other leaders of the military, I think it was the head of the Army, head of the Navy, I believe, I'm not so sure about the Air Force, came out with statements like Milley's and the former secretaries of defense telling the armed forces to stay out. Well, you don't do all that unless you're actually concerned sections of the armed forces are actually going to intervene. So there's a real plot afoot. Now, there's another piece of this. 2 weeks later, the same Admiral Stavridis has another article in Time magazine. This is after January 6th now, where he says there's a real threat of infiltration of the armed forces by what he calls extremists, Nazis, people like the Proud Boys and such. But he doesn't mention the real force that I and a lot of other people think. I've interviewed people like Larry Wilkerson. Before he died, I interviewed the former American ambassador to Iraq. Anyway, the real force in the military that I believe they were afraid of is the force of far-right Christian nationalists, which, according to Mickey Weinstein, who's the very involved with the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, and it kind of fights the recruitment of soldiers into this far-right Christian nationalism. He thinks that as much as a third of the army are now have been recruited into Christian nationalism.
A third?
Yeah,
Holy bucket. Yeah.
It's hard to put a number on it, but he's been at this for years, but also including very senior members of the military. So it was a real threat. And so what January 6th was supposed to be was an excuse for several things to happen. The plot was more or less laid out by Flynn earlier, the General Flynn, who used to be the national security advisor for Trump. Georgia was supposed to give him the 15,000 votes. Some of the states that they were trying to get the state assemblies to weigh in and reverse the vote were supposed to, at least one of them was supposed to come through. And then most importantly, Pence was supposed to come through.
Yeah.
And he was supposed to not confirm Biden. Well, why didn't Pence do that? Why did McConnell vote to confirm? Why did Lindsey Graham, who'd been a close Trump ally in the end, wasn't in the beginning, but by the time all this had happened, but Graham also voted to confirm Biden. Well, go back to the Association of American Manufacturers, because the corporate elites had already gotten out of Trump what they wanted, which was tax cuts and deregulation in many, many ways across the board. The fossil fuel industry got what they wanted, which was no action on, never mind no action on climate, outright climate crisis denial. But once they got what they wanted, they did not want the kind of disruption that would take place.